It's that easy. This technology is just absolutely wonderful. So I guess I'll introduce. This is James Hancock. He is a YouTuber, podcaster. Actually, I know exactly all the things that you do. You are a D&D gamer.
Part-time serial killer.
International man of mystery. That's kind
Absolutely.
of what
We
you are.
all have to wear many hats in our lives.
And you're in NYC right now, and it's where your home is. And you're my favorite podcaster. That's what people ask me. What's my favorite podcast? I say, Wrong Reel. That's my favorite.
Very
podcast.
cool. Yeah. Well, you've been incredibly kind and supportive over the years, like retweeting and signal boosting or reacting. And so much obliged for supporting the show.
For sure, man. Like, well, it's well earned. You know, you do give a lot of good content. You're a film connoisseur. You're a cinephile, as self-described. And while it's quite evident that you're a cinephile as well, too. And I am, too. I'm a sort of an amateur cinephile. I really enjoy movies and always have. And I like the range of your movies. What's your catchphrase, James, for Wrong Reel?
We cover everything from Jean-Luc Goddard to Jean-Luc Picard. And so, yeah, I probably should modify that because I don't watch any Jean-Luc Picard anymore because I hate what's been done with Star Trek in recent years. But the phrase is so catchy. And then John Cribb said, you should change it to we cover everything from Douglas Sirk to Captain Kirk. And I was like, well, once again, I got to avoid the Star Trek stuff because I used to love Star Trek, but sadly, no more.
I think you got to drop a Marvel reference in there or something like that.
But I'm losing interest in Marvel as well. So it's like, it's hard. It's hard work staying in love with the franchise for a long time. Very few of them can stay cool for a long period of time.
They had a 10-year run, which is absolutely unprecedented, I think, just in terms of the quality and the content that they have out there, and just the amount of just these epic films. They made billions of dollars, and you're right, after that Endgame, it just sort of, I think it's kind of done.
Yeah, today they announced all these shows that are coming to Disney Plus for the next couple of years, and I looked at all these logos, and I should have, as somebody who read Marvel comics from like 1979 onward, I should have greeted that image with glee, and instead I felt exhausted. I was like, so many shows. How many of them going to even be remotely worth watching? And I just feel like what we're seeing now is the dilution of the brand. And, that's just, I guess Disney is just going to run it into the ground.
Well, that's what they do best. Nobody does it better than Disney. Yeah. So God love them. Good for them for doing that. Whatever. Things come to pass and you move on to other things.
Yeah, nothing great lasts forever. I mean, I don't care what you're doing. No filmmaker is good their entire career. No series of books is equally great from start to finish. There are very few examples, and I just feel like, what we've seen in recent years, sadly, is a lot of these incredible concepts that were brand new at different points in like over the last 40 or 50 years, where they're just overstaying their welcome. And I just keep saying, look, create new shows and movies in the spirit of the things you love. I don't need to see a new Predator show where he's fighting the Comanche Indians. Make a new sci-fi concept that's just as cool as Predator, but break some new ground. And what we're seeing is just all these cool stories becoming brands, and they just feel so safe and kind of like fenced in. And
it's a corporatization of the art, right? And I work for a big company too. Like, it's risk. Everybody's really risk averse. That's how the corporations work. And so who wants to put lots of money into a new idea when, here's another Predator. We know that sells. Maybe it doesn't sell as much as
put very little money into a new idea. Like Terminator, when it came out, I think Terminator was like a $4 million or $8 million film when it first came out in 1984, which obviously was more then than it is now, but it was not some giant $300 million extravaganza. It was a relatively modestly scaled film. So that's where cool ideas can come from.
Yeah. And you get a good creative director who's willing to try new ideas, new technologies, and a new way of telling stories.
Yeah.
I fully agree with you there. It's, well, we'll see what happens. Everyone talks about the demise of cinema. They've been talking about it for probably 50 years, I'm sure.
Well, I mean, in the 90s, when I first got really into movies, there was this great DVD called Lumiere and Company, where all the great a lot of the great directors at the time all got together and made a short using the original cinematograph from like 1895 to see what you could do with the original technology. And Lynch did a great one. It was really cool. But even in that little documentary or collection of shorts, the filmmakers there were talking about the evidence that film was already dying on the vine. As long as people are telling stories with pictures, cinema will exist in some form. I mean, puppies kissing baby videos on YouTube are cinema. If you look at like early like 1890s, like early 1900 cinema, there's very little difference between like the early one reel movies and what we see on YouTube today.
Yeah, like the movie The Kiss, right? Like whatever.
Absolutely. Or How to Kiss and all that stuff. Yeah.
Was that what it was called? You know, the very one of the first.
There's like, I think there's How to Take a Bath, and I think there's one that's called The Kiss, but How to Take a Bath was an early classic. But yeah, but those early arcade shorts were pretty rudimentary and pretty basic.
I'm pretty sure How to Take a Bath is this idea that, you know, that'll go on forever. That one, I think.
Absolutely. Some people need that.
So James, I've listened to, because you have over, like, I'm a big Wrong Reel podcast fan. So that's the way I found you on Twitter or something like that. I'm sure I did, because I'm far overly online way too much. But you had over, I'm not sure what your count is,
570 something at this point. I don't quite know.
Can you imagine doing 570 of these things? It's absolutely ridiculous, the amount of content, and it's evolved over the past number of years that it occurred. And then the amount of content. I was just thinking about that. I've listened to you probably more than anybody else online, than anybody, because of the amount of content you put out there. I started listening to a Bible podcast because I've never read the Bible. I was like, hey, this would be kind of cool to read the Bible. So this priest is doing the Bible in a year. So it's been like divvied up.
Wow.
And it's actually pretty cool. There's a lot, looking at stories, man. Like,
I took a Bible class in my senior year in high school, and I basically would just reread the book of Revelations over and over again, because that's where like all the really, really good stuff was.
It's nuts,
man. That was the last time I did like the deep dive.
Yeah. So anyway, so I'm at like number 300, I think, right now. And I probably listened to maybe not 300 of yours, Matt. So you're right next to the Bible in my mind.
Nice. So that's good company.
Bible, James Hancock. That's kind of where you are on that. James, where are you from?
Born in Richmond, Virginia, lived there till I was 9, moved to North Carolina. Then for high school and college, went back to Virginia, spent 7 years in Los Angeles, 2 years back in North Carolina for business school. And I've lived in New York now for 13 years or 13 and a half years. So The accent is a mix of like Virginia and North Carolina, probably more North Carolina. I did one of those New York Times like accent tests, and it guessed 2 towns in North Carolina, one of which was accurate, and one which was the town next door. I was like, all right, well, I guess my accent is locked and loaded to Greensboro for the rest of my life. But I feel like New York has kind of flattened out the accent a little bit, but a little booze or the company of Southerners, and the accent comes roaring back.
Well, I'm in Canada, so I have a lot of friends who are from Newfoundland, and I tell you, you want to get an accent when the booze comes out of those guys, like you can't understand a goddamn.
Give me an example. How do they talk?
Oh boy, I'm not gonna try doing that. It's really embarrassing to even try doing like that, because like then all the newfies will be like calling you up and saying, give you a hard time. It's a sort of a bit of an Irish lilt to it, but more incomprehensible, if you can imagine that. That's how bad it is.
Are they a bunch of kind of burly, hard-drinking hockey players, or what is the culture of Newfoundland like?
Yeah, it's hard-drinking fishermen mostly.
Nice.
That's what they are too. I went on.
Are they like the descendants of Vikings, like from like way back when, or are they more like French?
Irish,
Gotcha.
Irish, and then Nova Scotia's from, and those kind of guys are from Scotland, so you get a little more of a Scottish sort of a different accent. But Newfoundland wasn't even part of Canada for like 50 some years, you know, those people. And really, I don't think some of them realize they are part of Canada at this point. It's kind of hilarious actually. But anyway, but I met a guy from Cackalack. That's what he called it, Cackalack. It's Carolina. It's from North Carolina.
Yeah, North Kakalaki. So, yeah. North Kakalaki and South Kakalaki.
Kakalaki.
Yeah.
So that's pretty cool. So where did your love of film get established, or what point in your life?
Like any kid in the 80s and 90s, I was watching shitloads of genre cinema, whether you're talking about, all the fun franchises from sci-fi to fantasy to horror. I mean, I was a junkie for all that stuff. And both my dad and my stepdad were big movie fans as well, and loved, Westerns and Clint Eastwood movies from like the 60s and 70s. So I watched a lot of stuff with them. But what really, I guess what made it click was when I got to University of Virginia. Took a few film classes,
right?
And for whatever reason, certain movies like Dr. Strangelove would just like seize hold of my imagination. I was like, all right, well, let me learn everything I can about this filmmaker. And then, of course, what ends up happening with any cinephile's journey is you fall in love with certain directors, then you start wanting to watch the movies that they love, which leads you to other directors, and it just it causes a chain reaction. And suddenly, there's just like 100 years of cinema waiting to be discovered. Mm-hmm. And so I basically spent as much of my college years as possible studying film history. And then I started interning in LA at production companies after my second year at UVA. And so I started going to revival houses. And once you start seeing old movies in the theater,
Right.
that's a big aha moment. And so that, it's now at this point been like a 25-year love affair.
Wow.
And it's come in ebbs and flows.
Yeah.
But when I started the podcast in 2014, then I really put my foot down on the gas pedal, because anytime you're going to talk about a topic, you got to learn everything you can about it. So I would argue that in the last 7 years, I've learned more about film history than at any other point in my life. But the passion was at its most intense in college by far.
Yeah, your podcast is to me, it's a film class, history class. That's exactly what it is too. And you do cover a wide range of topics here. We're going to get into that a little bit later here, but I'm just more interested in sort of your evolution, as they say, into who you are today, the man that you are today. Because you remember, because you and I are. I'm 45. You're
45. Yeah.
You're 45. We're same age, right? So we watch a lot of the same films. But I come from a really, 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 really small town. I'm a farm kid, and so we had 2 channels broadcast to us. There's CBC and CTV, those 2 Canadian channels. That's it. But it was really cool because the town right next to us, there's these 2 guys that had access to a satellite dish and a tower, and they would broadcast HBO, Cinemax, Showtime, Nickelodeon, few other shows for free. So we didn't have cable, but we had HBO when I was a little boy. And I was the youngest of 5 kids, and so I watched a lot of shows which were very inappropriate for me at that age.
I approve.
I
know your mother listens to this show, but my mother had a hands-off approach to what I watched as a kid, and I'm a firm believer in let kids self-censor when it comes to what they're into, because if they don't like something, more often than not, they leave the room and change the channel.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, and like mom, it wasn't so much mom was permissive about that, but other than the fact that she was just really tired, I think more than anything else after having 5 kids.
Yeah, my mom was like, "Look, get good grades, and I really don't care about anything else. If you're not being brought home by the cops, and you're being a good boy and you're getting good grades, play with whatever toys you want to play with, play whatever games you want to play, so on and so forth."
That's with my kids, I have 2 boys, and 9 and 10 now. And, I didn't show them everything at all, but now I'm at the point where I'm just finding these kind of shows from the 80s. And what my wife says that there's modern PG and then there's 1980s PG. Those are 2 different.
Oh, it's totally different. Yeah. In 70s PG, there was nudity, like straight up nudity.
There's some nudity
PG.
in early 80s. Like I made the kid, we watched Beastmaster. There's a good example show that I watched when I was a kid. And
I saw it a billion times. Yeah.
And it blows me away. Still, I watch it again.
It's great.
A little bit of nudity in there.
Yeah. Don Coscarelli, he's a great filmmaker. But if you like fantasy, there's basically Conan and Beastmaster, and I've done videos about 80s fantasy. There's a lot of 80s fantasy that I love, but there's not a lot of it that's good. Right. And so but Beastmaster is one of the few exceptions.
Yeah, for sure. And so I've been kind of trying to watch some of these movies from the 80s, things that I thought were pretty good. So I pre-watch them. And if there's not bad scene, it's a gratuitous scene, I just make the kids stand up, turn around, and look at me.
I mean, Rip Torn's throwing kids into a fire and sacrificial victims. I mean, it really messed me up as a kid when they're creating those those madmen with the spiked armor with the ooze they pour in their ears and all that.
Creatures that held people and suck the life out of them. That
it's hardcore. For a while. Yeah, is that what is that movie rated?
PG, just a PG. I couldn't believe it. Yeah, or at least
it feels like it should be an R today if you release it. It's but I love back then that whole phenomenon of 80s fantasy with people wearing loincloths, the assless chaps, and everybody was tan and muscular and nobody was wearing any clothing, men and women. And Beastmaster is just great primordial kind of prehistoric fantasy. In a lot
also,
of ways.
Celebration of the human form as well too, and primordial who we are as archetypal characters in that. It was just such a wonderful film. So I was exposed to that too as a kid, and I loved it. It really brought my love of film. So
HBO early 80s, that movie got lots of airtime. They just kept playing it over and over and over again for whatever reason. Beastmaster. I must have seen Beastmaster 100 times from age 6 to 7, and I loved it each and every single time. Yeah,
I watched it a few months ago, and I still remember every scene. I haven't seen it in 40 years or whatever it is, 35 years, I guess. So anyways, I share that with you too. So I have that young age to sort of this idea about film and what film is and what it could be, and these memories that you have here, they stuck with me so long. So I definitely appreciate that. You went to UVA then, and studied some film history there?
I was an English major, so I basically bluffed my way through my English major. I love reading. I've got a wall full of books behind me. I still read pretty aggressively to this day. But once my movies had their hooks into me, I would read the bare minimum because I was spending all my time just I guess like I was spent a lot of my time in a states of altered consciousness with my friends watching all kinds of movies. And my friends and I, for whatever reason, even though we were like total like frat guys, for whatever reason in the late 90s, it didn't matter if you were a frat guy, movies were just a huge part of the culture then in ways that it just aren't now. And like, even if all you cared about was watching football and drinking cold beer, you were still like watching Carlito's Way in your spare time and things like that. And like, I mean, I was discovering movies like Scarface at a frat house. And I feel like a lot of times people assume, oh, if you're in a frat, then all you do is crush beer cans on your forehead and break windows. But there was like a diehard film culture that like even people who were casual movie fans were watching great stuff. So I was just surrounded by people who wanted to watch kick-ass movies all the time.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. When we don't have frats at my university in Canada, but we had residents, so it was like all these guys living together too. I was a guy crushing beers and smashing them on my head, and so but when I moved out of there was actually a nice little video store just down the street, and I was broke. I had like no money by October, so I would just walk over, I don't know, 2 or 3 times a week and just find videos. And then I started, again, energizing my love of film by just finding all these different movies. And because I was broke, it was such a nice way to do that. And I talked to the clerks, and I had a crush on one of the clerks. And
should have gotten a job at the store, get free rentals. That's what I did. My senior year in college, I worked at Sneak Reviews, and it was like this snobby, elitist video store where we organized our entire collection with the last name of the director. And but I got to take him any tapes that I wanted, and and I got to take him a paycheck as well. So it was a win-win.
Yeah, well, when I moved to Calgary afterwards too, and there was a great video store that specializes in old film, like just like hard to find type stuff too, and it's just like 2 blocks from me, so that was really nice. That's when everything kind of started turning around. That's when I discovered Lynch, and I don't know, there's like all the great directors. There's one little room, it was organized by director, and you just and you found that sort of thing too. So again, then all of a sudden, man, I'm seeing some really interesting films at that time. So,
who's your favorite Canadian filmmaker?
I'm a huge Cronenberg fan. I think the guy is he's one of my favorite directors, not just period. Yeah. And Adam McGowan's really nice. I really enjoy his stuff too. I'm trying to think of some other ones.
Yeah, Guy Madden's a big one, but more niche.
Well, Denis Villeneuve, he's Canadian, isn't he?
Yeah, he's huge. Yeah,
he's the best. He's the best director going right now. He's at his peak of his game at this point. So I actually like Bruce McDonald. I don't know if you know him at all. He's an indie guy. He actually made a nice little trilogy of road films, and they're hilarious, and they're just a little bit debauched. This is the kind of guy he is. He won some award for one of his films, and he won $10,000, and he said on stage on live TV saying, "Oh yeah, I'm going to spend this money on hash." That's the kind of guy he's going to spend his award on that hash.
Now, were the hockey movies Goon and Goon Last of the Enforcer, were those Canadian movies? They feel Canadian, but I'm looking at Bruce McDonald right now.
I'm going to pitch you I pitched this to you before. I want to do a hockey podcast with you sometime. Anytime.
Yeah, I mean, shit. Fucking, sorry, I'm swearing. Like Slapshot's Killer and what are the great hockey flicks? I mean, Goon Last of the Enforcers makes me howl with laughter. I discovered that through Marcus Penn. But Slapshot's it's a dirty movie in a lot of ways, but I thoroughly enjoy it. And from the same person who wrote North Dallas 40, and yeah, damn good movie.
No, it's a great movie, and people kind of look at it as sort of it's crude and stuff like that, but man, it's funny, and it's good.
George Roy Hill directed it, correct?
Great pacing, and there's some good performances in it. The problem with hockey movies is, so you got to find actors that know how to skate.
Yeah, like
you can tell if you can't skate, like it's pretty apparent, and then you got to find like cameramen who know how to skate.
Yeah,
because you're going to be on the ice with these guys, and nobody knows how to skate. Like,
and then you got to find an audience that understands the game of hockey, which is kind of niche in a lot of ways, but like there are movies like Mystery Alaska which kind of carry over whatever, but it's
that was a good film. That was a really good show, yeah, for sure. And then there's Miracle, with Kurt Russell's in that one.
Yep.
Miracle on Ice, that was a good one. A really good, it's not a good film, it's a terrible film, but I absolutely love it, is Youngblood. Have you ever seen Youngblood?
Oh yeah, hell yeah, back in the 80s. Yeah. And my Winnipeg has a ton of hockey in it. That's another Guy Madden movie, but yeah, so there, yeah, anyway, long story short, yes, totally, we'll tackle some Slapshot and some other honorable mentions.
So anyways, yeah, so like a big Cronenberg and that kind of stuff. Although I didn't really discover him until a little. I was aware of him. I've seen a few films and stuff. I think maybe in 2000s I started seeing Cronenberg. I kind of like him, but I'm a big Coen Brothers fan. Like just the funny and then the tragic that those guys do. Like nobody does it like they do.
Sadly, they're getting old. I mean, they are, I mean, everyone, it's easy to think of them as perpetually young because of the energy of their movies. But I mean, I saw the Tragedy of Macbeth at the New York Film Festival, and Joel Cohen, he looks like an old man, and Frances McDormand, she's an older woman now, and it's like, oh shit, like these filmmakers are getting up there, and Ethan Cohen is kind of in a state of semi-retirement, wants to talk about writing plays, but the filmography of the Coen brothers is sadly drawing to a close.
Yeah, I remember watching when I was a kid. My dad, we rented a VCR because that's what you did, and we rented a VCR and we rented Raising Arizona.
Hell yeah!
Holy shit, that just blew my mind. And
yeah,
my dad
fantastic movie.
He's just crying, laughing. I've never seen a movie like that. I still haven't seen a movie like that. That thing is just absolutely completely.
It's Edgar Wright's favorite movie.
Oh, so fucking good! It's so good, so good. So you moved out to LA and you worked just as a summer job or as a part-time job? Or
I did 2 summer jobs at Out of the Blue Entertainment, working for Sid Ganis, but they were gearing up to make, at the time it was called Guy Gets Kid, which eventually became the Adam Sandler movie Big Daddy.
Oh,
so it was like, as a starry-eyed, naive young college kid, it was cool just to meet Adam Sandler and all that kind of stuff. And
that's cool. Yeah,
but I was just falling in love with, like, I was just like a zombie, just going from. Back then, you didn't have like the internet, or especially didn't have mobile phones. So I had a thing called the Thomas Guide, and I was using this big book of maps to find my way around Los Angeles County to all these obscure revival houses, and that's how I learned my way around LA. And then after college, went out there, and one of my first jobs was working at the William Morris Agency, which I hated. And then I ended up going from there into physical production, working for a producer on the film Hannibal. Did some accounting gigs on movies like America's Sweethearts and Geely, and then eventually settled into a role as like a reader of writing coverage of Phoenix Pictures, which was fun work initially, but the pay is terrible. And all day, every day, all you do is read screenplays and books that 99% of them are unreadable. And that, you're basically just writing, oh, this script sucks, this script sucks, this script sucks. And it just sucks the life right out of your soul. And I eventually realized, it's time to kind of press the reset button. And during that time, I actually did manage to produce a low budget horror film called Dead Doll, but decided the big reset button would be in my late 20s, going to business school and trying to learn a few more marketable skills beyond just, liking flicks.
Yeah, that's kind of a tough one, trying to find your way in that. It actually fills me with a little bit of, I don't know, hope. The fact that there's actually somebody reading those god awful screenplays out there in Hollywood. At least there's somebody who was doing that at some point.
A story that I love telling, and I wish I could remember the name of the author, but I had a stack of scripts and I read this really stupid monster movie. It's either like a giant bird or giant lizard or some stupid shit. But as I was reading, I was like, you know what? No matter how bad this is, at least I can tell myself that I will never read a script as bad as this ever again. And then I got to the next script in the pile, and it was the same writer. And it was basically the exact same formula, but with a slightly different monster. It was like, this one was like a giant gorilla. And I was like, no, you're killing me. And of course, every screenplay's got the writer's contact information, like their email and phone number. I was like, I'm calling him. I'm telling him like to retire, that he sucks. So of course, but I couldn't do that. I would get fired.
Don't do it.
Yeah, but I can no longer read screenplays ever. If anybody wants me to give them notes on a screenplay, I would just tell you sight unseen, your script sucks, and I'm not going to read it. I refuse. That's my one note.
Oh shit. Yeah. I have a friend of mine. She became a screenwriter. She was a journalist for a while and then became a writer and then a screenwriter. She just had her first feature film it was appeared at the Toronto Festival. And it's called Breaking Waves, I think it's called. And it's a nice little film. It's actually kind of inspired by Lars von Trier's sort of treatment.
I love it. I mean, I love Breaking the Waves. Yeah, it's a killer flick. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's not quite there though. But I just kind of like the way that like how these independent filmmakers actually find the little spots, right? And you're just at the New York Film Festival not too long ago, too. So you get actually a little sneak peek of all these little films that are
I got to see like Paul Verhoeven's latest Benedetta, which I loved. Got to see Tragedy of Macbeth. Got to see Dune early. Got to see French Dispatch early, and it's New York Film Festival's tons of fun. I love it.
Like, is it tough to get tickets for that sort of thing, or is it?
I get a press pass because of Wrong Reel, but you can, if you log on early, if you're a backer of Film Society Lincoln Center, you can just buy these like packages that if you're willing to spend like $500 on the thing, then you get early access and you can basically just pick whichever screenings you want to go to and you're off to the races.
That's
and you
actually not that $500 ain't that bad. Like,
and you get like 10, 12 tickets for that. And that's, so it works out.
Yeah. If you spend some time there. So I don't know if I can ever do that or not.
Yeah, but Toronto is huge as well. I mean, I've never been to Toronto, but Toronto gets way more movies. And so if you want to basically see everything that's going to be cool over the next year, I feel like going to the Toronto Festival gives you a pretty good snapshot of like a year at a glance of all the stuff that's going to be coming out.
Yeah, for sure. It's one of the biggest ones in the world, and most well attended, I think, too.
It's the biggest film market in the Western world. If you want to sell your movie, or if you're looking for distribution, once upon a time Sundance was pretty big, but Toronto now, like the festival's cool, but it's a great marketplace as well.
Yeah, that's what it seems like to me too. You're right. So this film, is going to be out there 6 months from now. Well, it's going to be at Toronto before anywhere else. So that's pretty cool, man. So you worked for a little while, and then you went back to school. Did your educated yourself, and then
got my MBA, studied marketing, and while I was doing that, I did a summer internship in New York for Showtime, working their new Smithsonian channel, and fell in love with New York and realized, New York's like the coolest place I've ever seen. So when I graduated from B school in 2008, moved here just in time for the financial crisis, and I was like, this is perfect timing. And so it was a strange time to be looking for work. But what was interesting is how at that time, due to the financial crisis, it was inexpensive at that time to buy a lot of cool technology stocks, which I did. And that allowed me to kind of pivot back into the world of movies, where once I had a little bit of kind of dry powder, I approached the director, Bill Plimpton, an animator who works here in New York. Mm-hmm. And he was looking for financing for his new feature film that he was working on at the time. So became one of his producers, made a couple of shorts with him, made a feature film called Geekin. And while I was doing that, while it was fun helping out from that point of view, I wanted to do something just more active. And at the time, the whole podcasting scene was starting to explode.
Yeah.
So I got together with some friends, decided to start the podcast Wrong Reel. And when I realized that I wanted to do this full time, but my partners were unable to commit as much time as I was, that's when I also started the YouTube channel so that all my excess energy could go into that. And now I'm in the stage where I want to merge the podcast and the YouTube channel together, because I like the brand Wrong Reel, but I like the traffic that I get on YouTube. And I feel like right now I'm kind of hurting myself, dividing my energy between the two of them. I just want to mush them together and have just one brand. So Wrong Reel with James Hancock, and that's what's going to be moving forward.
Well, look at that. There you go. I got the shirt.
Nice. Excellent. Well done.
It's actually one of my favorite shirts. Well, I'm a fan of yours, but it's also very comfy. Like, it's a nice stretchy tee.
Yeah, I've got like 6 of them. So yeah, I wear them. Anytime I go to the gym, I'm always promoting.
And I have my Hobo with a High Kick shirt as well too.
Nice.
But that one's falling apart though. All the little it's too narrow, the Hobo with a High Kick.
Oh, the letters are disintegrating.
The letters disintegrating. So I'm
gonna have to buy like 10 more.
I know. Here, Moose, I'll grab a couple more. I should get him to sign it. That's what I should do. Get him to sign it with a pen.
How far are you away from Michigan, where you are?
Long ways away. I'm in Saskatchewan, man. So that is in the middle of nowhere. Think North Dakota, go north. That's where I am.
Gotcha.
So it's
far.
Cold as fuck right now. They had a first
too far to pop down for a visit with Mr. Moose himself.
Nah, he's in Michigan, eh? That's where.
Oh yeah, Lowell, Michigan. Yeah,
I didn't realize that. Okay. Wow, that'd be nice to pop down and see him.
Yeah, so he lives in a small town, kind of rugged rural country, and so I imagine y'all would have a lot to talk about.
Well, it's nice to know that there's people all over the world, though. You're building this little community of these friends of yours that you're meeting online, pretty much, most of them, right? And developing these nice little relationships and building a little empire, I guess.
Yeah, Twitter can be a horrible, loathsome place. However, I mean, I met you through Twitter. I met Moose through Twitter. I've met so many different film commentators and filmmakers. Like just the other day, these 2 directors who made this amazing animated movie called Spine of Night came on the podcast to talk about the making of the movie. Yeah. That only would have been possible in the era of the internet, where just by virtue of posting a YouTube review, they saw it, they liked it, and they said, "Hey, when the movie comes out, we'd love to talk about it on your channel." And so I do try and focus on the positive side, but Twitter can be both as a platform in terms of just, as well as just the people you encounter. Yeah, it can be a jungle at times, but you just got to tap dance across those laser beams and focus on talking to the people that you really want to interact with.
Yeah, I'm just on the line too much. I get too worked up about things, and this is last year. So it's so horrible with everything, right? With, the goddamn Donald Trump's a goddamn idiot. And
yeah, but the political side of Twitter it can be a black hole where you can just find yourself, oh my God, like all I'm doing is like feasting on my hate of people all day.
Well, people they see there's idiocy out there, so they counter it with more idiocies. I'm like, just let it go. Just let it go.
Well, I think people have always been dumb. They were never able to advertise it as like vociferously as they are now. You live in a town and you would avoid certain people, and so they would just be a dumbass off like in their little like house on the edge of town or whatever, but they wouldn't be like vomiting it onto your feed. And so now I mute people and I move on because life's too short.
Yeah, that's good for you. You probably muted me already, but that's okay. I don't mind that.
No, you're on the on my good list.
Oh God, Jesus. Well, I better watch myself anyway. So, but yeah, anyways, you're right though. That's one thing I do like about Twitter. Meet these really interesting people out there and see what's going on out there. And I've been trying to get rid of some of the toxic elements in my cast here. But I see like whenever you have a show count on there, like a podcast or YouTube, I'm like, well, people should check this out. And I usually just tweet it and then I'll watch it. I don't know if it's good or not, but I'll just do that though. Because like, Christ, what does it hurt me to do that? You talk about these independent filmmakers that you interview and is little productions or people do these little projects. You're talking about that kind of stuff too. Like you're promoting it. Because I watched the Spike at Night. What did they call it again?
Oh, Spine of Night.
Spine of Night. Yeah, sorry. Spine of Night. I watched that. It was a great interview too. I never would have heard of that. It wasn't for Twitter. It wasn't for you. So
it's funny. It's an homage in a lot of ways to a Canadian production, Heavy Metal from 1981, which had all these great Canadian animators making this wild sci-fi and fantasy anthology movie with kick-ass rock and roll music. And I feel like people always forget that Canada produced like one of the all-time great adult animated movies.
Well, I know it because John Candy has his voice in that. That's why.
Hell yeah,
that's how you know it's Canadian, right? So
yeah.
It's just Canada's greatest person of all time in my mind is John Candy. So yeah, so you're doing these kind of things too, and then also with let's go. I don't know, people may not know who you are. I'm getting too excited about this. So you do Wrong Reel as a podcast and just as an audio version, and then your YouTube used to be Geekin in NYC. You changed the brand a little bit.
Yeah, I changed it to Geekin with James Hancock. I don't know why the word Geekin. You age out of it really fast, and I should have foreseen that when I started the channel about 5 years ago. I was like, oh, you're 40. Do you really want to go around talking about like how you're geeking out about stuff? Like that's like what an 18-year-old does. I should have just called it James Hancock. But once again, I'll do a little. If Facebook can rebrand themselves into the metaverse or whatever stupid name they've come up with, I can rebrand my YouTube channel into whatever the hell I want it to be. And so it's just going to be Wrong Reel, hosted by James Hancock or whatever. And that way the podcast as well as the YouTube channel are one and the same thing. And it's just going to help keep it all straight. And also with the guests, while there will still be some guests that'll do audio only, I'm going to try to make sure that all my guests are people who are willing to actually turn on the camera and do a video version as well, just to kind of up my game a little bit.
So you think some of those like really long podcasts that you do sometimes with the guys, like you want to do that as video as well too? Like, I
mean, Joe Rogan does like a couple 3-hour interviews a week and they do them live, no editing.
Yeah.
And so I will probably do a little editing in terms of like adding like posters and images and like some video clips and that sort of thing. But
and you do piss breaks and that sort of thing too, right?
Absolutely. But it's like, people aren't afraid to listen to long form interviews. It's like in the age of the internet, things are either 60 seconds or they're 3 hours. Like it's a TikTok video or it's like Lex Friedman interviewing some tech entrepreneur, but there is an audience for long form conversation. So when I'm lucky enough to get someone like David Lambert on who can speak at length about, Billy the Kid and like, the Wild West and that sort of thing, I just get out of the way and let him talk.
Yeah, that was great. That was their last episode with him was great. One Eyed Jacks, even like a sort of a mediocre movie. The story behind it all was really fascinating. I thought that was just great.
Killer book, great screenplay adaptation, and just a wild behind the scenes adventure.
Yeah. So David Lambert's, for people that don't know, well, you probably don't know, but I know he's an artist based out of LA or somewhere around there. He does a lot of nudes.
Yeah,
I follow him on Instagram. He's going to get kicked off Instagram too. He even said, I'm going to get kicked
he lives on an Indian reservation and he works for the morgue and he draws dead people for a living. And for a hobby, draws naked ladies who are willing to pose for him. But his great passion is reading about the actual historical West and then reading great fiction about the West and also watching great shows and movies in the Western genre. And so when he comes on, we try to do a mix of history, fiction and film all kind of stirred together. And I feel like it just gives people just a deeper appreciation of those topics. If you're going to talk about the Searchers, well, then you should probably know a little bit about how Texas came to be and so on and so forth. And I just feel like it just gives people much more context. And the Western genre is a tough sell with so many people. I feel like Wrong Reel in its own way is almost trying to like single-handedly keep the Western genre alive for a lot of people, or relevant for a lot of people.
I don't know anybody else is talking about Western movies, and also not just like the movies themselves too, but it's almost a history lesson about like the stories behind the making of the movies, or where do these legends come from? Because you got the
Yeah.
people, then you get the legend, then you get the movie. And there's about 30, 40 years between a lot of these Western guys and when the story started to be put on film.
Yep.
So you guys are capturing that. You're making that little link there, which I think is also quite relevant because you don't really know that kind of stuff. You see the guy,
the West,
movie, and that's it. So
like melted into the movie business in a lot of ways. Like when Hollywood was first getting up and running, there were still outlaw groups like living in the valley, like robbing trains and things like that. And then people like Wyatt Earp would work as technical consultants on movies. So yeah, it's like almost like the Wild West kind of fed into the Western genre and the creation of it in a lot of ways. And so, yeah, I find the Western genre absolutely fascinating. And so, yeah, I'm always happy to read a little history or some great fiction or watch some cool flicks. And coming up, we're going to be tackling the show that Sam Peckinpah directed called The Westerner. Before he became a famous director, he was working in television. So very fired up to tackle The Westerner.
That's pretty cool. I didn't realize that at all. But I guess all directors get their start somewhere, I guess, or they have jobs before they become the big director that they are. That's why I recommended that was that Guy Vanderhaeg. That's how you pronounce it. Saskatchewan-based writer, and he wrote this story about what was called the Cypress Hills Massacre. Cypress Hills are the tallest point in Saskatchewan, southern Saskatchewan near the Montana border. There was a bunch of natives, indigenous people living there, and these American wolf hunters. I think they got horses stolen or something like that. So they thought this Indian tribe stole it. So they actually jumped across the border, massacred all these women and children, and then they ran back. And that actually spurred what was called the Northwest Mounted Police. This is the founding of the Northwest Mounted Police, which became the RCMP, the Mounties. So that particular incident. So he writes about this incident. And he writes about this guy, the Englishman's boy, who was a young boy at this time, who witnessed it. And then later on, he's in Hollywood. And he's telling the story to people. So the story about them developing a screenplay and a story behind it. He's a technical consultant on that. So I saw you guys, you guys are talking about this. I'm like, you guys should read this. David Lambert should read that because he likes good books. And it's a great book. This guy is very Cormac McCarthy-esque type.
Very cool. Yeah, I've read a handful of books about Cormac McCarthy, and he's the man. Read All the Pretty Horses, read Blood Meridian. I read The Road, which I will never read again. It's grim. And I read No Country for Old Men, but I need to read. Yeah. I mean, he's got a bunch of others that I really want to get into. But so I've read like 4 of his novels. But yeah, he's one of the greats.
I always imagine Blood Meridian as a movie. You get a guy like Michael Shannon to play the judge. You know, Michael Shannon, he's a tall, freaking looking dude, and he's quite big and physically imposing. Just shave off. He's the kind of guy that would shave off all his eyebrows and all his body.
Yeah, Ridley Scott tried to get it going for a long time, but that book is a tough sell. And I guess when Billy Bob Thornton made that really crummy adaptation of All the Pretty Horses in like the late 90s, early 2000s, and if that had been a hit, that might have helped things. But No Country for Old Men by the Coen brothers, you basically, unless the Coen brothers are willing to do it, I almost feel like people should like leave their hands off of Blood Meridian. But the Coen brothers, they also were going to do at one point, totally blanking on it. It's Cuba Libre by Elmer Leonard. They got a couple different projects they wanted to do that they have not done. So you can't retire until you make Cuba Libre, and you can't retire until you make Blood Meridian.
I think my dad just read Cuba Libre. He loves Elmer Leonard.
It's a fucking great book. It's wild. It feels like a Western, but it's a Western during basically 1890s in Cuba.
Oh wow, Jesus Christ! Well, Elmore Leonard is a Western writer, even if he's not writing westerns. That's the sort of the mindset, though. You guys are talking about in the podcast about what's a Western. You know, like a Western's more of a it's a genre. It's not a setting. It's sort of a sort of a way like
they're Australian Westerns, and it's like, well, that's not the West, but they feel like Westerns.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, you've had a lot of really good collaborators on your podcast too. I always love Tony Stella.
Oh, he's awe-inspiring cinephile, and now really exploding as a great poster designer. I mean, he just did the re-release of The Outsiders, did these gorgeous paintings. I saw
that. That was nice.
I met Tony online probably 4 years ago, and just in that 4-year period, A, he's just gotten way better, but B, it's been just a joy to watch the rest of the world start to catch on as well. And so when you see people like Criterion or Arrow Video or whomever, or Amazon even, I mean, I was walking through Times Square at one point, this is giant billboard based on one of Tony Stella's illustrations for a show they're doing. I was like, oh shit, like Tony Stella has arrived. And so Tony is
wow.
Yeah, he did the logo for Wrong Reel, and he's done a couple of thumbnails for a
Okay.
lot of my YouTube videos, and
Sure.
he also did the poster for Hobo with the High Kick. So I'm honored anytime he's
I know he
willing
did.
to carve out some time for some of my endeavors.
Well, he's
But yeah,
great. He's
yeah,
German, I think he is, or something like that.
yeah. Well, his family's Italian in Germany. Lives in
So
Berlin, but he speaks Italian fluently as well.
okay,
And
yeah.
yeah, he knows, in particular, Japanese cinema and Italian cinema really well.
Well, I didn't think it was real because, like, who has a name like Tony Stella? Like, if that's not a made up name, I've never heard one. Like, he's like, I imagine Tony Montana and Marlon Brando from Streetcar Named Desire. That's what I think of when I see Tony Stella.
And
That
like
name.
Lambert, he brings up stuff that you can't find readily, like on Wikipedia or IMDb. Like it's no trick to watch a flick, look up the sound bites or the like easily digestible info on all these platforms, and then just regurgitate it. When you have someone like Tony Stella on, he's going to give you a book's worth of information that he has earned the hard way over years and years and years of research.
Well, his episode he did with you on Fellini blew me away because then I was like, Jesus Christ, this guy has such a love for Fellini and and a little bit more contempt for Visconti. But he was like, he just the love and passion that he had. Well, maybe that's the Italian. Well, it is the Italian in him for Fellini's films. And, you know, I was like, well, shit, I'm going to have to watch all these films now, too. So then now I'm a Fellini fan.
Because hell yeah. Yeah.
Because of that episode.
Yeah. One of the greats. Yeah.
And the passion that he had there. See, I didn't go to film school. I didn't know anything about these people.
Yeah, my first year in college, we tackled La Strada, Knights of Cabiria, and maybe those were the only two. Oh, and well, I think I on my own saw 8.5 and La Dolce Vita, but at any rate, I got lucky where I got exposed to Fellini in my first year in school. And so, I guess I just, sometimes you just stumble into things by chance.
Yeah. And then there's like, you know, I was taking a few notes here as well too. Well, I'm taking notes now because I'm the one doing the cheat sheets right now, but like Becky Deanna, for example, I think you guys did one on Bergman. She's a huge Bergman fan, right?
Yeah.
So Becky Deanna, she's with Sony, I think it is, or who?
She works in marketing at Sony, and I like to. I mean, she's very, she's very kind about repeating the fact that I exposed her to Bergman by taking her to the LA County Museum for I think it was either a screening of Hour of the Wolf or Persona, and then she took the ball and ran with it. And now she's seen like twice as many Bergman movies as I have. But she's a giant Bergman
She's
fanatic.
a lovely person. She comes across as a very lovely person too. But no, I'm a fan of Bergman. I'm loving Bergman now. I'll just go rip up Wild Strawberries or, Seven Seal. Like I was like, Jesus Christ, who wants to take on Seven Seal? It looks so grim. But you watch a show, it's actually kind of funny and it's very heartwarming and it's a show about death. But it's like it's such
his grim reputation's undeserved. And Becky and I, we met at summer 1998 at Out of the Blue Entertainment. My second summer of working for Sid, Becky was there as well. And so we've just kept up the friendship for like 23 years at this point.
Well, I don't want to say it's undeserved. I've seen Shame too. And that show was by Bergman. That was dark.
Yeah, some of them are rough. Yeah. But some of them are really light, like Smiles
amazing.
of a Summer Night and things like that. Like, he likes to laugh and make love and drink wine and all that good stuff.
Yeah, that was the first one I saw, though. I was like, okay, I can't just jump into all of them. Like, that's when you kind of build yourself too. But again, without that episode, I don't think I would ever tackle that at all. I would have been too intimidated by that one too, and you get kind of worried about the amount of time you're wasting on a film that you're going to hate or something like that, or you don't understand. Oh God forbid you don't understand something, you feel like an idiot or something.
But I think also it's another thing, like people assume, Bergman, it's like so like dense and intellectual. And once again, it's like, these are like 90-minute movies and just, start with some of the obvious ones. And there's a very good chance you're going to like them. But for whatever reason, I think people like to almost try to act as if Bergman's really challenging. Like, oh, well, only I can really appreciate how profound he is. It's like, he's not trying to like be behind like a walled off garden, like where his movies are inaccessible or opaque or unapproachable. And I find that his movies everybody can relate to the weird, dark, crazy shit that you experience in his movies. So
for sure, like Persona, right? Like it's kind of complex and like you really can't really describe it, but you watch a show, like it does make sense what he's trying to do there too. Like it's just a reflection on that. It's like what's a persona? Like he's a big fan of Carl Jung, right? And he's trying to explore the idea of the personalities that we have of ourselves, and then what's really inside of us, and it makes sense in there. And and I was a big Lynch fan. I love David Lynch films, and you can see the influence now too, which is kind of cool seeing the filmmakers kind of talk to each other that way. And because you're going back and exploring like he did, right? You go back and exploring, you kind of see the evolution where these films and where these stories and these concepts They started here, they were here, now they're here. Where are they going to go next? That's why we know that film isn't going to die anytime soon. We just need to be brave and go make better films. That's all we have to do. Or better yet, in my case, I can support better films because I'm not going to make anything. So, yeah, it's pretty cool that you're doing that. One thing I was going to ask you just really briefly too, I really am liking your audio productions you've done. You've done one with Lovercraft, another one.
Oh, yeah, audio fiction. Yeah. Those
Edgar Allan Poe with Victor Rodriguez. Tell me about that.
He's a novelist, and he does a podcast called The Sound of Fear, and he and I both share a love and affection for a lot of short horror, fantasy, and sci-fi fiction from way back bygone eras, and so we'd like to do more of them. And yes, we did Edgar Allan Poe's Casco Amontillado, and we did The Outsider by H.P. Lovecraft, but did a little sound mixing, add a little music, and that sort of thing. And as someone, I'm a big reader, and I love audio fiction, so those were a ton of fun. And Tony Stella did the posters for those, so those were really fun collaborations where I just got out of the way and just posted them on my channel. And now I'm working on like a radio play. All I'll say is that Moose Matson is involved, and that'll be the next kind of audio production that we crank out.
Well, I think it's a great idea. Well, for one thing, these things are all in the public domain, so you can just take it and read it, and you can make money off it, and don't have to worry about, or put it in any format you want to do. It's not going to hurt.
Or just keep them alive a few more years. If you want people to value Edgar Allan Poe, every once in a while you got to remind people that his stuff's really, really cool.
Yeah, and with the technology now, you can do that easily. Like this, we go through Zoom, you can just go do it, or find some way to do it, record it, send it over. Someone else can finish it off. Like you don't have to be in the same room anymore for these kind of stuff, and you have sort of access now to the voice actors and editors, anybody you need to do this kind of stuff. I think it's a really smart idea, and it adds a little more value to what you're trying to do with your YouTube channel. So I really appreciate it.
I'm just trying to have more variety, like just trying to do more short films, more audio fiction, more podcasts, more reviews, but I don't want my channel just to be me opining on certain topics. I do think if you're going to, occasionally rip something a new asshole, well, then you got to put your money where your mouth is and show and take the risk, because making content it's hard. Making good content is even harder. And so I feel like it helps keep you honest when you occasionally make, even a low budget movie or a low budget short film or whatever the case might be. Then people at least know that you're invested and you got skin in the game.
Well, making movies is hard. Making content is hard. And you don't know if it's going to be a hit. Like Heaven's Gate or something like that. That should have been a huge hit. It was an absolute disaster. It's a good example of it too. It's hard to make a hit. It's hard to make something that's lasting, people want to watch. And so, I used to watch all those movie mistakes or those stupid kind of fucking videos that are on YouTube all the time. And I used to laugh, and then I realized, what the hell am I doing? Like, I'm not these people. These people, there's hundreds of people working on this project. They want it to work. They're not trying to make it fail. And they screw up. Like, why are we celebrating that? Why are we giving clicks to a guy that's pointing all the little continuity?
Yeah, it's snarky. Some people just love to kind of tap dance on other people's destruction. And I mean, every once in a while, I will indulge in some friendly shit talking and that sort of thing. But in general, I try to make my try to make my podcast as well as my channel devoted to stuff that I love, or at least I'm trying to expose other people to, because I feel like then at a minimum, I'm doing like as little harm, hopefully, as humanly possible. But there are some people who just like to feed on the hate and they talk shit day and night about stuff that they despise. And that's just not my style. Like if I despise something, I just run out of energy talking about it and just start to drift away.
Well, unless it's Shia LaBeouf, I guess. So that's.
Some people, it's just fun to fantasize about breaking their neck and like slowly. And Shia LaBeouf is one of those people. I fucking hate the guy. Shia LaFuck face.
Yeah,
he dies in pain.
There's a few guys like that, though. No, I appreciate that you're kind of tackling those kind of things and trying to create some art too. It's such a shitty world out there. We need to have good creators, especially with like the corporatization, like we talked before, with a film that's out there, and that's fine. Like for my kids, it's fine. Like they like watching the Marvel films and all that kind of stuff too. But I don't know. There's so much good movies out there, but it's also becoming more difficult to find a lot of the stuff because there's so much noise. That's on the landscape. Yeah,
that's why curation is so important. You need a few critics or podcasters or YouTubers, whatever you want to call them, but a few people who are willing to watch more than your able to watch, and they can say, all right, look, of all the things I've seen in the last couple of weeks, this one is worth a look, etc. Because people have careers and families and a minimum amount of time. And once you there's this giant forest of content out there now, it's like you log on to Netflix, you're like, oh my God, like where do I even start? And of course, they're pretty good at recommending things. That technology is remarkable in that way. But I do think in the end, you just need to find a few writers or commentators whose taste and judgment you trust to a degree, so they can at least give you a heads up about some stuff that you might think is worth your time. Because in the end, time is the most precious resource. If I can save people some time so they don't have to watch some stupid fucking show, awesome, like mission accomplished.
Well, even that, or even showing some context of the movies, like a particular show, like this is why the show's important. This is why it's actually kind of cool. Like it's not a perfect show, and it's got its flaws, but it does this very, very well too. Like it's okay to say that. Like this whole Rotten Tomatoes thing, like it's good. You get a score. Like it just reminds of Dead Poet Society, where you have to like do a chart. You see.
Also, a critic will give something like a 6 out of 10, and they'll count that as a positive review. And then another critic will say, give it like a 10 out of 10. Well, like that, the tomato meter needs to find some way to say, like, well, of the people who said it's positive, only 10% of them said it's really good. The rest are like, oh, it's okay. But like, that's one thing it overlooks. And if you go into the weeds and look at the individual reviews, like, oh, this person said it was 2.5 out of 4. And it's like, well, that sounds like it kind of sucks. Like that doesn't sound like a positive review at all. So yeah, it is a useful guide in some ways, but I do find it interesting always just studying those movies where the audience and the critics are totally out of whack with one another, where the critics hate something and the audience loves it, or vice versa. And that happens all the time. And every once in a while, they'll actually see eyeball to eyeball. It's very rare, but occasionally it does happen. But I always love just seeing the disconnect between people writing for certain newspapers and the people out there who are actually consuming the content.
Yeah, like Christ, I'm going back and revisiting a lot of these nice 80s shows so I can preview them for my kids so I don't get in trouble with my wife. But like I watched Back to School with Rodney Dangerfield. And Rodney Dangerfield, he's like one of my favorite comedians.
Oh, yeah, remember, you're a melon. Yeah.
And I watched that show, and what a great movie. Like it was so funny. It was perfectly tailored to him, obviously. It's him. But it was just really well done. It was
tailored to Sam Kinnison's best movie role.
That's how I discovered Sam Kinison. Yeah. He was amazing in that. Yeah, I was like, who the hell is that guy? And you know, like
pussies like you. Yeah. Oh.
And how many like reviewers would have loved that film? Like, I bet you got panned by everybody else. But
I went to a great Truth or Dare party in 6th grade where that movie was being played, and the girls had arranged ahead of time who was going to kiss who. And so at certain points they would just like send people out of the room for their 7 minutes in heaven and come back. But I'll forever remember Back to School being the movie that was playing throughout that really chaste, innocent Truth or Dare party.
And it's so stupid. It's such a dumb movie, but it's also really good. And like, there's value in that. There's value in these kind of like shitty little shows here too. And just by putting a certain algorithm to it, it does no justice to the fact that, you know what, this is actually a good show. It's going to make you laugh. It's going to make you feel good for 90 minutes, and you're going to go to bed and you'll sleep well. That's a lot of value in that too. So yeah, I really agree. So I like the way you kind of do it. Like I remember you just did the thing about the internals, you know, the Marvels, the internals. And a lot of people are bashing for being boring. And you're like, no, it's actually, give it a chance. You're saying like, it's not the best film, but it's actually not a bad film.
It's actually a very ambitious movie, like way more ambitious than most Marvel flicks. And it's like, it blew my mind that the same critics who were applauding Chloe Zhao's earlier films, The Rider and Nomadland, were suddenly bashing Eternals. It's like, well, this doesn't make any sense at all. But there are so many mediocrities that Marvel puts out there that get a 90% on Rotten Tomatoes. And I feel like Rotten Tomatoes is a classic example where it was really underserving a particular movie. And a movie that what's so funny is how you would expect something that's very cerebral and kind of distant and kind of ambitious it would be the reverse, that the critics would love it and the audience would reject it. But it got like an 85 with like the people who actually saw it. So somebody was watching it and liking it and connecting with it. And so once again, there's the audiences and critics right now I feel like are further apart than they ever have been at any point in history. And I don't know why that is, but I remember like in the late 90s, New York Times had a couple of writers like Elvis Mitchell, who I just absolutely loved, or A.O. Scott, where I'd hang on their every word.
Right.
It's really hard to find critics who I like. I mean, my favorite critic right now is the author Bret Easton Ellis, who has a podcast about film culture, but he's an author. he's not a professional critic, but he opens up every podcast with like an hour-long essay or rant about film history. And then he'll have a filmmaker or an actor on and talk about flicks. He does an amazing job. So I discover a lot of cool flicks through his show.
That's a good, we've mentioned him before. I haven't listened to him. I'm a big fan of his. I've read all his books.
It's behind a paywall, sadly. It's on Patreon, which really limits its exposure. He does a free version where people can kind of sample it, but if you want the big essay, you got to pay for the thing. And a lot of people, the idea of paying for a podcast, they're just like, what? No, sorry. And so I get it, but I really like his book. So
for you, and just you talk about it if you don't want to talk about it. So you make it a living off the like YouTubing too. Like it's like you said, you want it through the podcast and then through YouTubing.
Not 100% exclusively. Like I supplement my income with it, but my main income comes from when I mentioned earlier how when I moved to New York during the financial crisis, I started scooping up some technology stock at low prices at that time. Wow. Very careful portfolio management, but also I don't have any kids, and if you don't have any kids,
for sure.
that makes your cost of living go down, threefold. And so it's
for sure. Yeah. And you live
so while New York,
in a small place and
New York, I pay a lot on rent, but otherwise I don't really have a really expensive lifestyle. And so, but I would love to be able to claim that through YouTube and through the podcast that I'm able to pay all my bills. That would just be totally inaccurate. I have, a side gig doing my little portfolio management just of my own investment portfolio.
Yeah. It's like, McDonald's, right? They make their money through real estate, right? That's how McDonald's makes their money. They make burgers, but they make their money through the real estate, and the same as
interesting. Yeah, I know. Almost, I did a few case studies about McDonald's back in business school, but it all went in one ear and out the other.
I didn't go to B school, so that might be all bullshit too. But it's an anecdote I heard, so I thought it was kind of interesting. So that's what I pull out when I want to feel smart about that sort of thing too. So that's I was trying to think of some other things that you have here as well too. Well, I just want to shout out to all the great collaborators you have on there too. Like so
I've been very lucky to find a lot of kindred spirits who kind of share. I guess if I were to give a few shout outs to some recent episodes that I really liked, I would definitely give a shout out to episode 577 where I talked with filmmakers Philip Gillette and Morgan Galen King about The Spine of Night.
I recommend that too. Yeah.
I really enjoyed my recent episode where I talked about the making of Halloween with Becky Deanna. And I guess to a degree, I fall in love with all my episodes. Oh, my late career Orson Welles episode, Wrong Reel 569 with Kevin Marr. I really enjoyed that. We're basically talking about all the work he was doing after his career as a director was sadly winding down. But I guess as like any content creator, I'm always more interested in or more in love with whatever I've done recently. And so, I'm always going to plug and promote anything I've done in the last couple of months.
Yeah, no, that's fine too, for sure. Well, that's why I'm at too. I can't catch all your episodes because there's so much they've had out there. Although you are slowing down, I noticed with the podcast.
I just recently, over the last couple of months, I've been focusing more on creating video content. It just, for whatever reason, YouTube is much better at matching eyeballs with topics that those eyeballs want to look at, whereas iTunes does not do that. And so I find that like the podcast, it's just harder for people to find the topics that they're interested in, whereas YouTube is just like they grease the wheels, which is why I want to increasingly merge the two ventures, because it's just too damn hard for people to find these topics. Or maybe some of the topics we could tackle on the podcast are just too niche for certain people, but there are so many. Lex Friedman's a perfect example where he does these giant topics about really niche subjects when it comes to technology. People find it and they love it. And so I just like, if he can do it with technology, then I can do it with cinema. And so, that's why I'm merging the two platforms together.
Well, with YouTube as well, you can categorize too. Like, let's say short load of videos. This could be, you can even categorize, this is all my Marvel stuff. And this is like all my, film history type stuff, or however I want to do it too. So you can do a quick little search. There's a long form, the short form, and then you can kind of mix and match that as your heart desires for that. So I've been noticing how you've been doing that. I think that's interesting. I'm really interested in seeing where you're going to go with that. And I like the fact that you're going to do call it Wrong Reel with James Hancock. That's what you call it. That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah. Well, also you're a podcast host now, like arranging guests, scheduling, et cetera, and so forth. It's, it's time consuming. It's fun work, but it's still work. But if you're just gonna make a video, well, then it's like, well, you can just go see a flick and start ranting and raving. And so it's just easier sometimes if someone say, hey, I want to talk about this movie that's coming out, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, all right, well, I'm going to see it on opening night and I'm going to do a video that night. And then I'm done and I'm moving on. And it's just sometimes it's easier and faster just to crank out a video. So anyway, I really enjoy messing around on YouTube. And there are plenty of reasons to criticize or have grievances toward YouTube. But in general, most of my experiences on it, apart from the occasional psychopath, most of my experiences are pretty positive. Also, I don't dive into any like political topics. I'm never getting banned for talking about certain topics. I know there are some people, if they tackle certain issues, YouTube would just ban their videos sight unseen, which is like, really frustrating for a content creator.
Yeah.
But for me, no one's going to ban my videos for talking about Eternals or something like that. It's pretty vanilla in terms of how controversial my videos are.
I should have mentioned that too. And I mentioned we had this little back and forth one time about this too, about like how I appreciate you're not political. I don't know what your political views are, and I don't even care. You know what I mean? I have no idea what it is. I don't know how you vote. I don't care. I don't even care if you vote or not. You just deal with the topic. And if the only time you ever
Death
talk about
to
politics,
all human beings is my platform.
if you talk about politics, it's in the context of the art itself, right? Like if you
Yeah.
talk about Oliver Stone, well, you have to talk about his politics about that.
Exactly.
But you don't have to make a judgment on that sort of thing. And he had that really nice interview the retrospect on James Woods. And James Woods is a right wing nut and whatever.
He's
a hell of an actor, though.
He's a polarizing figure, as people say.
He's a great actor, and he's a very unique actor, and I think he deserves to have a little bit of recognition in that sense. He's a very, very solid.
And what was fun about that is the person who came on to discuss it, Bill Scurry, he's a left of center guy. And so that for me was what Wrong Reels should be doing. If you can find somebody who's left of center politically, who's celebrating the art and the work of a right of center performer, that just shows that there is room for human beings to get along and put down your flag for whatever, tribe you belong to. But like, I have friends and family members on both sides of the equation, and I would say my right wing friends think I'm a total left wing nut, and my left wing friends think I'm a conservative nut. I'm just a pretty moderate guy.
Yeah,
and I've never really cared. I mean, I'm not like ignoring the politics of the filmmakers that I cover, but I would never let their politics prevent me from digesting their movies if their movies are fucking killer. Like a perfect example of Pier Paolo Pasolini, who was a total out and out communist.
Yeah.
I'm not a communist, but I can definitely appreciate a wild anti-authoritarian or anti-fascist film like Salo, 120 Days of Sodom, which is one of the most controversial movies ever made, and it will make your hair turn white. I'm not going to deprive myself of that unique artistic experience because I disagree with this personal politics.
Or like Elia Kazan, who's one of the greatest directors of all time and made On the Waterfront, just a wonderful film, right? But rubbed the people the wrong way. And it's like, well, I understand why it rubbed some people the wrong way, but it's still, you wouldn't criticize. You would say, no, that was a wonderful film. It was
On the Waterfront is On the Waterfront, irrespective of whether or not he named names about Are You Now or Have You Ever Been a member of the Communist Party.
So if anybody's looking for some content out there, just want to know about entertainment. It's not just a movie. You talk about comic books. You talk about a few other things. If you ever want to talk about Game of Thrones, actually, I'm your guy. I've read those books probably about, I'd say 5, but probably more, 6 or 7 times. All right, well,
give me a prediction. It's been 10 years or more than 10 years since The Dance with Dragons. And I did read Fire and Blood and A Night of the Seven Kingdoms, but what I really want is Winds of Winter. I'm convinced it'll never come out. And he's just going to let it go. And he might give us a sequel to Fire and Blood, and that's it.
Yeah, or Duncan Egg short stories. Because he's actually a short story writer. That's what he really enjoys, those little novellas. I think the story just went too far. And I think it's gone too ambitious, and I don't think I think he knows that, and bringing that back together. Well, the show is just, the ended just so poorly because the showrunners couldn't put it back together either, right? So George Martin's like, why would you want to spend the next 10 years of your life as you move into retirement working on the next 2 books and putting out I don't know, 1,600?
I mean, it's in his early 70s. I don't know if he'll ever publish like a novel ever again. Because in the 90s, when he was not successful, he wrote the first 3 books in rapid succession. He's very capable of working quickly when there are economic imperatives that he do so. Yeah. But now he's a wealthy, successful guy, and I get maybe he should have just made it a trilogy. But man, it's so frustrating as a fan because it will always be a flawed proposition where you say, oh well, the show's amazing, but it sucks at the end, or the books are amazing, but they don't have an ending. Yeah. What kind of legacy will they have long term if you can't recommend either the books or the show where they have a satisfying ending for
Yeah.
a potential new convert.
Yeah, I don't know, but I've read the books many times. I love them, and I'm just really big into the symbolism and the mythology of them all. They're just absolutely great. I know them very, very well. So again, if you ever want to talk about it, that's fine. Actually, tell you what, if Winds of Winter ever comes out, give me a call.
Nice,
We're
excellent.
gonna talk about Winds of Winter.
Well, I heard a conspiracy
10 years
theory
from now.
one time, and I don't know if this is based in fact at all, but someone said that he wrote Winds of Winter. He was getting close to being done, but then he realized that since 2011, obviously with like outrage culture, cancel culture, whatever you want to call it, the culture in the world of publishing, et cetera, it's all changed pretty dramatically in that 10-year period. And of course, I would just say, stick to your guns, do what you do best, publish your novel. And if people get pissed, let them howl. Like, who cares? You're George R. R. Martin. I heard some people have hypothesized that he's been trying to rewrite or kind of recontextualize his story for this new era in which he finds himself. I hope that's not the truth. Once again, that is total rumor at this point, but
I think there's some truth into it. I think there is. There's a lot of controversy about, say, Daenerys in Game of Thrones, where she was like a 15-year-old girl who was married to, who was sold off, essentially raped. Wasn't said that, but that's what happened to the sort of.
But there's lots of castrations as well. Like, these are savage books.
Like things,
and I feel like
that in particular pissed a lot of people off, because it's like, well, people who don't mind the Mamies and the gorings and the slavery and all that kind of stuff would take a young girl like that and kind of make her into that sort of character and then hero, and then maybe she's gonna be the baddie as well too. And it's like, this culture is not conducive to that kind of thing, and you have to.
I feel like if somebody's not howling in protest, and maybe I should follow this advice that I'm giving, but if you're not making somebody howl in protest, you're not really trying hard enough. And I always try to avoid controversy with my podcast and with the YouTube channel. Maybe I should try, not deliberately, but just not be afraid to piss off a few people. But I feel like as an author as successful as George R. R. Martin, if he can't write whatever the hell he wants and tell people to go fuck themselves, then like, who can? I mean, he's a giant author.
Yeah, J.K. Rowling's getting canceled, whatever, but she's worth $1 billion. That woman. Well,
yeah, I mean, she's wealthiest person in the UK, so she's like, you could take your Twitter outrage and stuff it where the sun don't shine.
Like
and
Dave Chappelle.
Yeah. What I've said many times on the podcast, that at a time where people are telling you what you can and can't say or what you can and can't do with a movie, it creates a marvelous opportunity for people who are willing to court that controversy, because you're then creating content that's totally unique and singular. It's not watered down. It's not diluted. It's not risk averse. And so some people like Dave Chappelle just go all in, all the same. And that's why his latest special, The Closer, has been a massive success on Netflix, irrespective of the controversy.
Yeah, for sure. Well, let's hope that it's going to continue, and there's some brave souls out there too. Better you than me. I'll just stay here in my little warm basement here with my little kids and watch some Disney for the next little while, and try not to raise any controversy. Maybe I better get off Twitter too a little bit more often too. So,
I mean, James Woods, he's still on Twitter. They take away his account every now and then, but it's like, if all you have to do is just not be as outrageous as James Woods, and you're fine. So and he says some crazy stuff. So
he's nuts. I love him.
Yeah,
he's nuts though.
I just wish, I know he's wealthy. I wish he would just produce like a play or a movie where he could share his singular talents with us, because I know he's still got his chops. I know he can still do the work, and I know he's independently wealthy. So make a $2 million movie and produce it and star in it. And I just think he needs to be in front of a camera and not hammering away on Twitter every day.
Well, your podcast even talked about, like, try to name another actor like James Woods. You can't. He's singular in the sense of sort of that little vulnerability, but there's a bit of a menace in there too. And,
I mean, you watch Salvador, Videodrome, Once Upon a Time in America. I mean, there's some mean, gnarly movies in there. He's a total
but even
badass.
something like Casino, right, where he plays this absolute scumball too. Like, it just plays. I can't imagine anybody else in that role. He just plays it so well, because you can see why this beautiful woman would love him. You can see why, because he has that. He's able to do
master manipulator.
He was just so good at that. So, well, I don't know. We'll see if James Woods. Here's the hope that he's going to do that again.
But we do see with like comic book writers and actors. I just think if you're a content creator, don't spend so much goddamn time just talking on social media, because Brady Nelson was talking about how in the 90s when he was living in New York, he saw a lot of his contemporaries where they basically drank away and talked away their best novels, where they would hang out in bars, talking with other writers, and there were fascinating conversations, totally just speaking at length on all these wonderful topics, but it's like they should have been putting that crap on the page. And I think the same thing happens with a lot of great content creators. They spend so much time just ranting and raving on Twitter. It's like, no, turn off the goddamn computer, write your book, make your movies, make your podcast, whatever the case may be, but create the content and let the consumers do the talking on social media.
Yeah, they can do this. Consumers can figure it out. There's a market for anything like that if it's done well. That's a very good point. Maybe I should shut up and start writing shit.
Write some cool shit.
Work on my novel that's been sitting there for 15 years. But
you've got a book that you've been chipping away at.
Yeah, I hated it, but there's something there. There's a germ there, and I think I'm going to change the approach to it a little bit. You know what I've been doing? Reading a lot of mythology. I've been looking for sort of. I think that's a nice way to. Like I read a lot of Bernard Cornwell books, right? And
okay, yeah, he's one of those writers that I always intend to get into his stuff, and then I never do so. But he did he's the guy behind like the Last Kingdom series, correct?
Yeah, for sure. And Last Kingdom's a good example of that one. It's really all he does is it's like the Horatio Hornblower books. He takes a battle. Here's a battle. It occurs. He writes a story around this battle. This character happens.
And there are like 9 books in that series, aren't there?
15 books or more. Like it's
Jesus.
insane how many books. Well,
the next season of Last Kingdom is the last one.
That might be 10 there, but I've read also his Sharp series. So that's of a Sharp, this guy who's in the Napoleonic Wars. It's the same thing. Here's a famous battle. This is what you know about it, and then so write this character into it. It's such a great little easy way to do it. So like, I'm looking at mythology books. Like, here's a pattern. Now put it in this setting with these people. Change this, change that. And then just build around it. So you have this framework. So I don't have to make up a story like Bret Easton Ellis has to do that. You can just like follow a framework, a tried, tested, true framework. So you got like Gilgamesh here, or there's
and Neil Gaiman said some really cool in the foreword or the intro to his book on Norse mythology, where he said, "Look, these stories have been told many times by many people over many centuries.
Yes,
but he says they've never been told by me." And so even though he's not reinventing them, he was telling all the myths that he could, and based on Norse mythology, in his own voice. And I found that book one of the most unput downable books I've come across in many, many years. I just sat in the bathtub for hours like, this is fucking incredible. But he was joking about how if he had known what a bestseller was going to be, he would have written it much earlier, because he waited until relatively late in life he never thought in a million years that the book would just be a runaway best-selling smash, but it was. It's fantastic.
Well, that's really interesting too. Yeah, I've never read that. I know Neil Gaiman. I've seen some of his shows. I never read any of his books though too, but I hear about this kind of stuff. My kid, he's 10 years old. He reads like you wouldn't believe. Like he reads more than I ever did.
Well, I would recommend he read Norse mythology, but
he does.
If you're worried about him getting in trouble with your wife, the Neil Gaiman Norse mythology book does have some pretty saucy bits, because those Vikings were a bunch of savages. They were not afraid to go to the dark side.
I could keep that. I could read it, keep it till he's a teenager and look at it. But like he reads those Percy Jackson books. I don't know if I read those ones at all. Rick Riordan books, and those are setting in Greek mythology in modern times, and then more Norse mythology, and I read some of them too, and Roman mythology. My kids, I started reading mythology to my kid at a really young age. I bought these little
Dolores or whatever. Yeah, I read that Greek mythology book until the pages fell out when I was a kid.
Oh yeah, we have that one and the Roman one as well too. And then got a little Egyptian one, a different one group for them. My kid just absolutely loves this kind of stuff.
So I've never met a single person who knows how to pronounce that author's name. Everyone's like, it's like, I'm like, yeah, I just say Dolores. I have no idea.
Delaires is how I say it.
Delaires,
that's the way I say it. I guess it is though. But the kid just loves, and he reads his books over and over and over and over again, and it's so good. And they just take these stories. But because I read the Delaires, he reads these Percy Jackson books. He knows all about these kind of stuff too. So the kid's that much further ahead in understanding these kind of stories, and he understands mythology. And a lot of podcasts. I'm sorry, I'm taking up some of your time here, but a lot of these podcasts that I've been listening to now too are about like symbolism and religion and those kind of things too. Like we have a modern mind. We don't understand that people back then, they actually lived. They lived with Zeus being real. It wasn't like Zeus was some sort of cool little construct. Zeus wasn't Superman. Zeus was actually Zeus.
No, if you sacrificed a bull to Zeus, you were doing it for real.
Yeah, and you couldn't go touch Zeus or physically see him, but he was still a part of your life.
Or he might turn into a cow and come down and seduce your wife. Like he could do all kinds of things.
Yeah, it was part of your life, right? And it actually helped put your society together. And we've lost that mythology in our lives. We lost that. And the stories were a way for us to understand these mythologies better too. Like there was no such thing as an atheist in the old days. Like everyone believed in something. And if you didn't, you were crazy, essentially.
You get hit by a bolt of lightning.
But
that's what you get.
That enchantment in our lives, I guess, too.
I mean, if the old gods ever want to come back, I will gladly drop to my knees and worship them all. And yeah, I'm very jealous. I recently started watching the show Vikings because there's a new spinoff of Vikings coming out in 2022. I was like, you know what? I need to see Vikings in order to be able to review that. And once again, in the show Vikings, Loki, Thor, Odin, all these characters, they are real. They're a part of their lives.
They're very real. Yeah, too. And there's one guy, he's like an Orthodox Christian guy. He's an icon carver. I follow him all the time. He's awesome. Talks about symbolism in the church. He's like our age too. He's a funny guy, French Canadian. But he says, like, somebody asked the question, like, do you think these gods are real? It's like, what, Zeus? Is like, yeah, Zeus is real. Zeus was real. And all these gods are real. I believe in all the gods. But like, aren't you Christian? He's like, yeah, these gods existed. These existed in people's lives. He's like, we don't understand that anymore. We don't.
Well, my gods are filmmakers, so yeah, I worship many gods of cinema and fiction, and so I've got a deep reverence for a lot of these figures
because they tell the stories that matter. That's why, and that's how we understand this kind of stuff. And without our fucking stories, we don't get anything anymore. We don't understand ourselves. And we just like sit all day on social media and just shitting on each other all day.
Absolutely.
So anyways, James, I'm so glad that you're able to join me here. I really appreciate
thanks for the invite. And we'll totally tackle some hockey on Wrong Reel. And yeah,
let's see. Okay, I'll send you.
We'll get weird. I feel like if you're going to talk about hockey, then you got to be prepared to talk about some pretty risque topics. I don't know if it'll be appropriate for your mother to listen to, but we'll get into the weeds on it.
But I tell you what, though, I know about hockey. You know about film. We can make a good podcast together.
Yeah, I don't know shit about hockey, so
no, that's my job. I can figure it out.
I've seen one big hockey. I went and saw the New Jersey Devils play against the what's it, the New York Rangers? Bear Smith.
Yeah, Rangers. Anyway,
yeah. I saw them play in Jersey. I took because my brother loves hockey, so we hopped on the train, went down there, and so it was my gift to him, and we had a fine time.
Oh, it's the best sport to watch live too.
I watch MMA. I was at UFC this past Saturday in Madison Square Garden. So yeah, I watch both equally violent. Just MMA, they put the gloves and the skates aside, and they just beat each other to death with their fists.
Do away with the pretense of like trying
take
to
away the
goals.
Sticks and the pucks. Like, let's just fight. So
goalies, you don't need goalies. Just let's just get right at her. So. Thanks for that. Oh, you should plug your show, your podcast as well.
Yeah, so Wrong Reel is available on every platform where you typically find podcasts, and go to my YouTube channel, Geekin with James Hancock, and on social media, just look up James Hancock. I'm currently suspended due to the Live and Let Die opening title sequence from the movie. So, but you can always find Geekin with James Hancock and/or Wrong Reel on Twitter, Facebook, etc. And I typically try to crank out, handful of videos and/or podcasts on any given week. So there's always something new to sink your teeth into.
Absolutely. It's absolutely worth it. So hope you people go enjoy that. So thanks, James. We'll be in touch.
Absolutely. I will see you around the Twitterverse. Hopefully we neither you nor I will be getting in fights like the great James Woods.